Well, while the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power and the Great Basin Air Pollution Control District reached settlement on 7 legal issues, local citizens today prepared to rally against dust mitigation work on the Owens dry lake to save what they say are thousands of Indian tribal artifacts at the lake bed. Bennett Kessler filed this report. Now, in the first case, Air Pollution Control District Director Ted Shady said his agency had sued DWP for failure to pay attorney's fees. The case was set to go to trial Monday in Kern County, but both sides reached agreement. In a joint statement, APCD and DWP said, quote, "In the spirit of improved cooperation between the city and Great Basin, the parties agreed to settle the Kern lawsuit and resolve various appeals before the California Air Resources Board," end quote. Now, DWP stood to potentially pay up to $8 million in penalties in this case. Instead, both sides agreed LA would give the APCD $1.2 million for air pollution mitigation projects and $150,000 for solar power for 6 public service districts in southern Inyo County. Now, both sides are continuing talks on, quote, "new and efficient ways to control air pollution from the dried Owens Lake bed," end quote. Now, meanwhile, the disgruntled were gathering for a demonstration at the dry lake today because construction in an area of reported cultural artifacts was forging ahead. Seems DWP has blamed the Air Pollution Control District, which said the ball is in DWP's court. Now, APC Director Shady said there is a legal procedure to follow on cultural artifacts. He said that his board passed a motion that if DWP's archaeologist finds significant resources, he has to call in a second archaeologist. Said Shady, quote, "If both say it's important, we move the area out of the cleanup part of the lake," end quote. Now, as for the current situation, Shady said, quote, "DWP needs to follow the procedure," end quote. Now, Shady said if 2 archaeologists decide the resources are significant, he will issue an order halting work on the area. Shady said DWP had proposed this procedure last summer. Now, Kathy Bancroft, Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Lone Pine Tribe, had stopped work on the site earlier this month. Tribal members say this site in question includes thousands of artifacts, in part from a massacre of Native people, which, quote, "took place at the hands of the U.S. military out of Fort Independence," end quote. Now, tribal representatives say the APCD and DWP have failed to respond to efforts to protect cultural artifacts. DWP was scheduled to begin work in that area Thursday. And again, that rally was set for this afternoon on a road south of Boulder Creek, Highway 395 to the east. And Bennett Kessler also filed this story. Kind of like a transfusion from a dead patient, DWP wants to pump water up from under the Owens Lake and use it for dust mitigation on the dry lake bed. LA has done test pumping, and Inyo wants DWP to do what it has rarely done: come up with an environmentally safe plan to pump, monitor, and mitigate any damage. Now, this issue came up for a report at the Standing Committee meeting held last Friday in Independence. Now, DWP staff said tests are underway and talks about protection. Inyo Water Director Bob Harrington reviewed the county's recent letter to DWP in response to LA demands at the dry lake before spending any money on projects there. Now, Inyo mostly agrees to what DWP wants, even to admit that pumping on the dry lake does not fall under the long-term water agreement if DWP admits all other pumping does. Now, Harry Williams of Bishop called for triggers to stop any pumping before damage is done. Sally Manning said DWP should not pump before completion of an environmental impact report. She said small amounts of pumping could, quote, "diminish springs and aquifers which harbor sensitive species and vegetation," end quote. Lynn Greer told the LA officials she had seen a flyer in downtown LA that talked about 100 years of the aqueduct and a child drinking water for the future. She said, quote, "We would like to have a heritage and a future as well," end quote. She called for better conservation education. And also, in a list of some 55 mitigation projects, the DWP was required to complete an assigned agreement more than 20 years ago. Nearly half are undone or have problems. Now, we had a report earlier on this, and I urge you to check out sierrawave.net to see more on Bennett Kessler's second report on that story. Well, except for the Mammoth Town Council race, all of the rest of Mono and Inyo counties seem to be in place for the upcoming election in June. Now, Monday marked the first day candidates could file nomination papers, and the deadline is March 7th. Now, longtime Mammoth resident and businesswoman Deb Perrell did pull nomination papers Tuesday, and we're getting information from Joe Perino that he pulled an election packet for a seat on Mammoth's Town Council. Perino said, quote, "Let's face it, Mammoth needs new blood that recreate and can think outside the box when it comes to bringing new revenue sources to Mammoth's world-known recreation playground destination," end quote. Now, in that post on his Facebook page, Perino writes, among other ideas, that he would like to restructure the Chamber of Commerce, stating, quote, "We continue to struggle when it comes to attractions to get visitors to extend their stay," end quote. Meanwhile, incumbents are not rushing to file papers. Mayor Rick Wood said, quote, "Despite the rumors that I definitely am or am not running, and I have heard both, I am considering it and will announce my intentions soon," end quote. Now, Wood said it is an important decision for himself and his family. Wood has spent 12 years in all on the Mammoth Town Council. Now, Councilman Matthew Lehman said he is not 100% decided and is leaning toward not running, but is weighing all the options. He said, quote, "Deciding to run for a second term has been a challenging decision. I'm proud to be a representative of the community in which I grew up. Very proud, but I have to find a balance between finding enough time to properly represent the town and maintain a reasonable living," end quote. Now, Lehman said, taken seriously, the Mammoth Town Council job requires a significant amount of time. Councilman John Eastman will not run again. Eastman did call the upcoming election, quote, "a golden opportunity," end quote, for those who want to serve. He said he hears there are at least 2 and maybe even 3 different groups in Mammoth Lakes that are organized and meet regularly in an effort to come up with either a candidate platform or to identify potential candidates to run for the town council. Eastman also said he personally believes, quote, "there are dozens of individuals in Mammoth Lakes who would make excellent representatives," end quote. On the Mono County scene, if nomination papers are filed, the race is on for District 5 Supervisor Stacy Corliss. Kirk Stapp and Greg Eckert are the candidates. District 1 Supervisor filings would see Supervisor Larry Johnston and Bill Saucer as candidates. Sheriff Ralph Obenberger and Officer Ingrid Braun will go for sheriff, and Assessor Bob Musel, Barry Beck, and James Ackles will run for assessor. In Inyo County, if nomination papers are filed, the District 1 Supervisor's race will see 3 candidates. They are David Tanksley, Bill Stoll, and Dan Tothero. District Attorney Tom Hardy will seek election, and so will his assistant, Joel Samuels. We'll be back with more news.